This is Ex-Human File. Every story is a case. Let's open the file. In the early hours of August 8th, 1963, a Royal Mail train carrying millions in cash rolled south from Glasgow toward London. It was supposed to be just another overnight run. Routine, timed, predictable. But somewhere in rural Buckinghamshire, that routine was about to be broken by a man who understood something dangerous. A system does not collapse when you attack its strength. It collapses when you learn its habits. And Bruce Reynolds had studied those habits very carefully. This wasn't just a robbery, it was a test of timing, discipline, and control. And for one brief moment, it worked so well that it looked less like a crime, and more like a machine. The man behind the plan, Bruce Reynolds, wasn't remembered as the loudest man in British crime. He became remembered as the one who could think bigger. Multiple accounts describe him as the mastermind behind the great train robbery, the man who pushed the idea beyond a normal gang job and into something far more ambitious. That matters because most robberies fail in predictable ways. Too many people, too much panic, too much violence, too many variables. But Reynolds wanted something else. He wanted structure. The target was extraordinary, a Royal Mail train carrying high-value packages, much of it in used banknotes. According to Britannica, the haul was about £2.6 million, an enormous sum at the time. The gang also had help from inside information about train schedules and cargo. That inside knowledge changed everything, because once you know when money moves, how it moves, and who protects it, the robbery stops being a gamble. It becomes an engineering problem. And engineering problems can be solved. Why this train could be stopped. The Glasgow to London mail run was valuable, but it was also vulnerable. The train moved on a predictable system of signals, lines, schedules, and procedure. If you knew where to interrupt that system, you did not need to overpower an institution. You only needed to redirect it for a few minutes. That is exactly what the gang did by tampering with a line-side signal near Sears Crossing, causing the driver to stop unexpectedly just after 3 a.m. on August 8th. According to accounts of the robbery, the gang covered the green light and powered a false red signal, forcing driver Jack Mills to bring the train to a halt. When the second crew member, David Whitby, went to use the line-side phone, he found the cables had been cut. He was overpowered and the robbery began. That one detail tells you almost everything about the plan. This was not chaos. This was sequence. Stop the train, cut communication, control the crew, move the money, disappear before the system corrects itself. That was the real weapon. Not brute force, but interruption. The robbery itself. The gang had another problem. Stopping the train where they did was only part of the plan. They still needed to move it to the unloading point near Brydago Bridge, where they could transfer the cash more easily. Accounts say they intended to use one of their own men, a retired train driver, to move the locomotive, but that did not go smoothly. Even so, the gang managed to get the mailbags off the train and into a waiting truck. Britannica says the robbers took £2.6 million, while other detailed accounts put the figure at about £2.61 million, with most of it in used notes. They removed nearly all of the targeted sacks, leaving only a small number behind because the operation had a time limit. That detail matters too. Even in the middle of one of the most famous robberies in British history, the gang was thinking in limits: time, weight, distance, risk. That is what separates a reckless crime from a planned one. Planned crimes do not chase perfection, they chase the window. But the robbery also had a human cost. During the takeover, driver Jack Mills was struck on the head and seriously injured. Reports say he survived but never fully overcame the trauma of what happened. And that's the tension at the heart of stories like this. People remember the precision, the money, the escape. But beneath every perfect plan is someone on the receiving end of it. The hideout and the illusion of control. After the robbery, the gang fled to Leatherslade Farm, a rural hideout in Buckinghamshire that had been obtained in advance for the operation. There, according to police and historical accounts, they counted the money, divided it into shares, and even played Monopoly using the stolen cash. That sounds almost absurd now. A gang steals millions, then celebrates with a board game. But psychologically, it makes sense. The most dangerous moment in a criminal plan is not always the action itself. Sometimes it is the moment after success. Success makes people careless. It lowers fear. It turns discipline into relief. And relief leaves fingerprints. Leather Slade Farm became one of the biggest reasons the case unraveled. Police eventually found the hideout along with getaway vehicles, discarded materials, and one infamous clue: a Monopoly board carrying fingerprints. Thames Valley Police describes it as one big clue because the gang had played after the robbery and left behind evidence they thought they had removed. This is where the story stops being only about intelligence and becomes about human error. Bruce Reynolds and his gang had outsmarted the railway system for one night. But they could not outsmart their own sense of victory, the collapse of the perfect crime. The farm was discovered only days after the robbery. Historical accounts say police found the truck, the Land Rovers, bedding, mailbags, banknote wrappers, and other material linking the hideout to the heist. They also found prints that had been missed during cleanup attempts. That is the twist in almost every organized crime story. The plan fails where the planner feels safest. Not at the signal, not on the bridge, not during the transfer. At the hideout. The place that was supposed to absorb the pressure became the place that preserved the evidence. From there, the manhunt accelerated. Britannica says 12 of the 15 robbers were eventually caught, convicted, and imprisoned. The trial began in 1964 and became one of the biggest criminal proceedings in Britain. Detailed accounts say it involved hundreds of witnesses and exhibits. Several gang members received severe sentences, with the ringleaders getting up to 30 years. For the public, the robbery became legend. For police, it became a puzzle solved piece by piece. And for Bruce Reynolds, it became a life sentence of reputation. Not just as a thief, as the man who planned the crime that captured the world's imagination. Why Bruce Reynolds still matters. What makes Bruce Reynolds interesting is not just that he helped plan a famous robbery, it is that he understood systems and psychology at the same time. He understood that uniforms obey signals, that drivers trust procedure, that communication can be broken, that time pressure shapes decision-making, and that people once successful often become less careful than they were before. That combination is rare. It's easy to think of crime as stupidity mixed with greed. But some crimes are built on observation, on patience, on a very cold reading of how institutions behave. That is why the Great Train Robbery still survives in public memory, not only because of the money, but because it exposed something unsettling. A modern system can look powerful right up until the moment someone learns exactly where it is blind. And Reynolds, by most accounts, saw that blind spot before anyone else did. The human file. So what is this story really about? Not just theft. Not just planning, not even just ambition. It's about control. Bruce Reynolds did not need to overpower the whole railway. He only needed to control a few minutes inside it. That is the lesson buried inside this case. The biggest crimes are often not acts of force. They are acts of timing. For one short window, the gang controlled the signal, the crew, the communications, the road out, the hideout, and the narrative. They made the impossible look rehearsed. But no plan survives human nature forever. Someone gets comfortable, someone makes assumptions, someone leaves something behind. In this case, that something was enough to tear the whole illusion apart. And that is why Bruce Reynolds belongs in Human File. Because this is not just a story about a robbery. It is a story about what happens when intelligence, ego, discipline, and greed all share the same room. For one night, Bruce Reynolds looked like the architect of the perfect crime. But perfect crimes do not exist. Only crimes that look perfect until the file is opened. And with that, this file comes to a close. Thanks for listening to Human File. Subscribe, and I'll see you in the next file.